Thank you so much, ma'am. It's always better to go back to the origins, right? And what that does is gives us a broad picture about, your school, where you're coming from, and how you've seen education for the last 20 years. Maybe, we just deep dive a bit on about yourself and about his international school. And I think we can take the conversation forward from there.
So I think, yeah, 25 years is a long time. And to be, involved in, just one focused organization and, one field. Today's world, everyone is moving from one, field to another, you know, company to another, one group. Yes, being involved in just this task, yeah, it does mean that it was very closely connected to my heart, to my understanding, or my actually purpose of what, I feel is an important area that women, I think people should be looking into, which is raising kids. So basically, not that I, being a dentist, I didn't have that, school as a dream. But when it came to raising kids and when I had my own kids, I realized that, school, the way I educate my child and the school that he or she will go to is going to, have a long-term impact on everything related to my own family, to my personal life, and, long term in terms of, what the child does in life. Raising a child, of course, is a huge responsibility. And that's when my attention did turn towards schools. And though when I was sometime in the US, I did see my own experience as a student did come out like I won't say happy. I was happy. I did it really well. But I always felt that I was not able to be myself in the school because somewhere I couldn't be myself. My identity was not really out in the open. And I thought that's really important. And when I went to the US, I did see schools where children were very relaxed, very open about who they are. And that's when my child came into the world, I was like, I wished he would also get something like that. And that's when, there were a group of women who had started a school where the Muslim child was going to be given the importance and the extra special attention in terms of, the faith and faith studies and things like that. So of course, that really pulled me, and I didn't at that time too wish to be part of the school. Circumstances went that way, and I was asked to become a trustee. And then I realized, oh my God, that's a huge task to take on responsibility, not only for my own child, but that of almost the community. And I started going deep dive into education, what it is, and how schools need to be run. So that's my back. And that's when I got into and pulled into, the field.
That's very interesting. I think you mentioning that you going to the United States and then like getting that understanding of how schools work over there, and then, being able to see how students experiencing education over there. And you're finding that, that juxtaposition in terms of how education was done there and how you wanted to see education over here was something very interesting. I think definitely international exposures do something really well. But apart from that, I think really heartening to hear your entire trajectory in terms of how it started from being a dentist to, today heading an international school the last 25 years. But yeah, thank you so much for that. I think like, a key question that comes about generally like when engaging with directors and heads of schools is that definitely I think, there's a lot that goes about in terms of building an educational institution, right? And, but was there a moment, right, that shaped your values towards education um, or towards building the institution, like over a period of time where you're like, these are the values that perhaps I think today I stand by. I mean, that is something would be really interesting to understand from leadership.
All right. So I think most of us, I think, would have gone to convent schools at that, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Yeah. So I think convent schools were giving a, a good a good value system to children, and we all believed in that. But somewhere, I think what we didn't get, and what I think today Oasis is the difference is probably the way society has changed, the way the whole culture has evolved and the kind of openness that is expected in today's relationship between adults and students. At that time, we were all right to take instructions. But today, teachers have to be friendly. They have to be more open to student voice. They kind of have started the world, the way it's changing. The children today are far more aware, more mature than what we were. So the teachers and adults, all of us have somehow started in some way know that it's so important for students to participate in their own journeys. You can't tell them what to do. They somehow, because of all the, online learning that's happening, the exposure that they get, they somehow have a kind of an understanding as to what their path is, what they want to do. So our role in schools today is not so much to transfer information and knowledge because they have everything there with them. Our role is to just guide and be like a mirror, a kind of a, what would you call, a bouncing board for them to kind of just put out the ideas and we just kind of listen, give them direction, a little bit of kind of the mentoring part. I think that's the big role that schools are quite by default have now taken on. So at that time, of course, we don't know what's coming next. At that time, we didn't have anything in particular that this should be the way schools need to go ahead. But I think just kind of letting yourself be open to the change and adapting to the situation and keeping your purpose, your focus. Yes, the child has to be raised. There has to be the moral education. There has to be the purposeful. They need to be focused on what the society needs rather than what I want to do kind of a thing. So that focus needs to be there. I think that is more now very much needed and very much what schools have got into, the community aspect, that let children decide based on their interaction with the community as to how do they want to see the world now with the crazy things that have happened, climate change and, calamities and a lot of stuff, we just read about wars and here today they are in the middle of. So it's, there's not much that I think has come from that time. It's about how the society has evolved and how it's influencing us today, that schools have to take on a different outlook to that.
Awesome. I remember like the last time having this discussion with you and then your experience about, teacher training in particular and that unlocking a different layer altogether in terms of seeing education. I think that was something very interesting about your journey to University of Bath, if I'm not wrong. I'd love to hear that from you again. I think the listeners would be really interested to as well hear about that journey of yours.
Right. So it's like as I went along, developing and feeling I need to keep upskilling myself to be able to do a good job with the responsibility that I had. So that's when it started, actually, the training. I needed to upskill and I joined a university. I found the program that Bath University was doing in educational leadership. And while doing that, I had to do my dissertation. And for the dissertation, and we had already started the Cambridge PDQs. So I
Which year, if
used
I may?
this Bath was, I think, 2014, 2016, or maybe before I started it. It was a long duration. It was a distance education program. So it took me around 4 to 5 years to complete it with different modules and then to do the master's in leadership. It took me 4 to 5 years. So the dissertation was in 2016 when I submitted so that was on evaluating the few teachers, actually, how their transformation has been when they take on a training program. So I used my dissertation to understand teacher evaluation. And I used the student-teacher relationship as a tool to understand how well a teacher has progressed in her training. So that was pretty interesting, where the relationship is kind of assessed by the students. So we do student surveys and the questions are based on how they relate to the teacher, how they connect with the teacher. And that student-teacher relationship in some way gives an indication of how the teacher is actually performing. So that was kind of, I think, a big takeaway for me too. Besides, of course, the whole program was very, very nice. But the actual, I would say innovation that came out of it was that we were going to, I won't say assess teachers, but evaluate them also using a tool which is connected with the students. And STR, as we know today, is a big one to, kind of nurture, kind of get, that's one of the best ways that you can get children to kind of motivated to learn. In fact, there's a school, I don't know whether people know about it, in Cambridge itself, which is based on relationships, just relational. It's called relational teachers, relational schooling. To a large extent, I think we quite unknowingly are a kind of a relational school. We spend a lot of our investments in terms of programs that we take that actually develop the social emotional learning of students, and of course caring for the teachers that train them. So yeah, that was about the Bath experience, which was
Like that bit like stayed with me. I think the last time when we were having a conversation about this entire aspect of the relational aspect of, schooling and so on and so forth, and also about your specific, interest towards teacher training and so on and so forth. Because, like as we had this discussion the last time, there are lot many schools out there, and you see them, when you see it from very close, you understand that lot many operational challenges they go through, but at the same time, you realize that they're not doing something very different. But I think on the contrary, like when you talked about being very, very particular about teacher training and how they develop as professionals, and at the same time, this aspect of relational schooling, I think that's something really is very interesting. And I so wish that other schools as well, like, pick this up from Oasis. Yeah, I think it's been 25 years and at about 1,000 plus students. And if I were to ask you, like, what's something that Oasis International School does differently by design? If you could elaborate on that, that'll be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, actually, sometimes when we get into doing things as they come, and like for us, it was a journey, infrastructure was not something that, we kind of designed, or it happened and then we entered the school. It kind of evolved. We moved from, a bungalow to bungalow before we moved into our Hennel campus. Probably we did not realize what is going into it. But there was this counselor who, who would come to our school, and she said, I don't know what I see here. There's something so different about the kids here, the way they interact, their openness, their, their ability to, their confidence. So she kind of started pushing me that I think we should go deeper into this. We should research it. Again, I was doing a program with the counseling. So we got into it, and we said, okay, let's kind of interview our students, let's interview our alumni, and let's see what they find, different. And interestingly, what came out of it was this concept which I had not really read up about, but what we call as transformational leadership emergence. It is a phenomenon where you can detect amongst the children based on some of the indicators as to who will be a transformational leader. So we found that Oasis children in the case study, and I think it's a published study. I actually published that in a journal. So it's the combination of identity, the faith identity that we were kind of focusing on, and the critical thinking, which came from the Cambridge, affiliation and the board that we are affiliated to. So a combination of identity, strong identity, and critical thinking leads to something which is an extrovertedness in students, which indicates transformational leadership emergence. So that is something I would think that by design, we were focusing on faith, focusing on values, focusing on the social emotional needs and, learning in children, and giving them an international education, which would open their minds, give it them exposure. So a combination of these led to its leading. We interviewed alumni, a sense of belongingness, a sense of connectedness with the school, and a sense of confidence and extrovertedness, where we see them, a lot of them are doing things which are going to ultimately work towards the society, right? So being positively contributing and responding to the needs of society. So that perhaps we have to yet see. We are 25 years, our children are now getting into the society, but that's our dream too, to get children to be, change makers and positive influences in the societies. Maybe our not very focused design, somewhere our value systems or the initial focus that we had helped them to, or helped some kind of a design come out of what we had in mind.
100%. Because very recently I was checking out this guy called Arthur C. Brooks, and he is a professor at Harvard University who dwells into the science of happiness, right? It's very interesting that Arthur talks about these four things that really like build happiness in a person. If someone wants to like increase their level of happiness, maybe they should just focus on these things. And he talked about how someone needs to focus on friends, family, and then he says work, and then very interestingly, fourth aspect he says is faith, right? And then he says that I do not. I mean, he came from a particular faith, but he was like, look, I don't care like which faith are you from, but as long at the end of the day, like if you believe in something, maybe in a faith, maybe in a cause, right? And then you stick towards it, and then you are true to it. It's almost like you have your own moral standard of code, and then you live up to it. That also, like the state of happiness and and satisfaction, which is super interesting. Very interesting that like Oasis focuses on these elements that naturally like has this element of openness within their students. It also has to do with the values that trickle down from the leadership, and I think it's very interesting how that has a trickle down effect and then affects everyone in a positive way. Yes, this one like it keeps when I think about voices, this topic just comes to mind, especially about your journey, of establishing the school in itself. It's very interesting how it started and where it is today. And I think that that journey itself has a lot many lessons for often than not like go through that journey, right? And so they do not get those lessons. If you have to like give some advice to the women out there, or maybe who maybe are planning to do something, or maybe, maybe not planning to do something, but maybe looking forward to something, or anything, any advice or any lessons that you think, women out there should know, I think that would be really helpful.
Like I said, I think I was pretty happy being a dentist when I started my family, and I was part of a, dental clinic, and I was looking into children's or people's mouths. And then when this opportunity came to get into schools, I think it's the calling. I would tell women that I think you shouldn't follow what you are programmed to do always. You can always look out for what you really enjoy doing and feel it's connected with a bigger purpose. I think the purpose really is what drives you and what kind of makes you do things which people think is not possible. So, for women or with a family, how can it be possible for you to work? That's the usual thing, neither does your family want you to go out and stress yourself over work, and nor do people expect that of you. But I think as women, if you have that drive, if you have something that really has meaning, for you, I think somehow the energy comes and somehow the time happens. I personally, with the family of 5 kids, I have 5 children. I enjoyed, I just felt it's so, if you can connect what your individual goals with goals that, if you're in an organization, bring that together. It makes things easy. So all my children studied at Oasis. I was driven. There was always that desire to ensure that my children are getting the right education. So along with my personal motives, I had the bigger motive to help the society. So what I want for my kids, I want for other kids too, for the community. So I think when you share, goals, and when you think of a bigger picture rather than just your individual thing, I think the whole world helps you get there. It's like that. It's like, everyone seems to be working towards that goal with you. So a lot of people came in while we were running the school. There was how we got into Cambridge with the head teacher of a UK school. She had she was staying very close to our Benson Town school, and she couldn't work officially because she was with her husband's visa. So she kind of knocked at our door and said, "Is there something I can do for you?" So just that, from where did she, and everybody who met her said, "How did you get this lady?" Now her name is not coming to me, but how did you get her, to work with you? So we had these kind of miracles happening for us all the time. So it's just that if a window of opportunity opens, I think, you shouldn't think twice. You should just get into it. If it has a community goal, if it is for a bigger cause, then there's divine help that comes and pushes you towards it. So I would think women need to look beyond, their
That's
own
super, super
comfort
interesting.
zones.
100%, 100%. Reminds me of there's this guy in the US called Naval Ravikant, very interesting guy. He says that, if someone wants to, the wrong way of building a network is by basically going to conferences and, like going and, talking to people. That's not how one builds the network. But he says that if someone is wanting to build a network. He says that what you do is you work on a cause, you work on a purpose, and then your network automatically starts expanding,
Yeah,
right? Which
that's
is
true. That's true.
very
It's
interesting.
just like that. People are kind of were attracted to us like, bees.
Right, that the relentless focus on one thing, on the education sector in one place for 25 years. It's almost that there's actual effect on that quadratic equation, right? And things just start compounding very interestingly, right? This, like just brings about an extension of a question.
Got her name, Michelle Price.
Michelle Bright. Oh, like,
So she was our head, she was the head teacher of a London school who knocked and just came into our school offering her services, and she changed a lot for us.
that's really, really interesting. Like this the same guy, right? Novel, he talks about another thing. He says, you know, if because he is always thinking about these bigger ideas in life and so on and so forth, and has like this particular focus on execution, right? Like a very specific focus on execution. He says that if someone were to just pick him up and drop him another part of the world, right, it would be very easy for him to build up from scratch again. And that brings me to the next aspect of the question. Let's say that, you know, hypothetically speaking, were to, pick Dr. Ambar and then like drop her in Poland, for example, right? And if she were to start her life all again, and and if she were to build a school, what do you think, like, like she would build a school that would look like in 2030?
What it would look like?
In 2030,
What it would look like? Okay.
what kind of school would that be? Right? Is something I'd love to understand.
Right. So I think you can't think of the future without AI now. And the way learning has changed, the whole concept of learning. It was, when we started, it was just about the idea that learning is just a transfer. But now when we look at how we understand learning, it's so situational, it's collaborative, it's about constructing understanding. And now with AI, giving you so much of information, it's about decoding information today. It's about checking whether this information or this solution is sustainable, looking at the way the world is going. So I think schools very soon, and 5 years down the line already, and the way AI is doing a lot of, I would say data, it's giving us a lot of data and information. I think the skills that we are looking at will be completely different. It will be a school that will, kind of have a lot of projects, a lot of, case studies, live, problems, issues that the world is facing, because knowing that nothing is now local, everything is so global. I think it will all be about, content will not be from texts. It will have to be from real life. It will be a lot to do with, sustainability. It will have to do a lot with, adapting, building skills that will make children more resilient, more, looking at ability to understand ambiguity, not be like, very, clear in terms of structure. It will be very loosely framed, like how they have a proper curriculum, what they do, first, second, and third. I'm sure by 2030, it will be, where students will come up with their own kind of ways of, they will bring in the content as to what they really want to study and understand. And, their own personal journeys will be what will drive the school itself, right? So it will become more personalized, more individualized learning. And teachers, I think, will not be so focused on their lesson planning. Rather, they will be working with children to, problem solve and, make decisions about a lot of things that are so happening. So it's going to be, yes, AI is going to be dominant, but I'm sure the role of the teacher is going to be as strong as ever now, with the guidance that children will need with an overload of information and overload of data that they have. I think the teacher's role will become stronger and I think more significant than it is today. I think that's what the school will be like in 2030.
100%, 100%, right? Yeah, I think it's so relevant what you just, you know, elaborated upon, where things are just like changing at exponential speeds. It is almost like a disruption happening out there in today's world every 4 or 5 weeks. And it's phenomenal to see that we are living in this world as we speak about this. And I think there've been like these different technologies that have come up on different things, right? Well, let's say the 2000s were the era of the internet, and then the 2011s, right? Post 2010, it was the era of apps. And then 2018, Bitcoin came about. There's a huge craze on how these decentralized systems are working. And right post that, you have this culmination of AI and all other technologies. So you have futurists talking about the technological convergence where things start to exponentially change right after that. So it took about 75 years for 100 million users for people to start using telecom services. And then it took about 7 years to get about 100 million users in the internet era. You see how that exponential shift
Yeah.
happened? 22. To get about 100 million users, ChatGPT just required 2 months. So that exponentiality is just growing and things are changing at breakneck speeds. And I think that's one of the main reasons, like even at GoSquad, was like, okay, if AI is just able to do everything, like, when it comes to knowledge work, like what is it that we supposed to be teaching students, right? Is it already time that things have to change in terms of how it's being communicated to them, how do they receive it, or what do they do in the nature of assessments, and so on and so forth. So which is very interesting to like witness this at this age. We would love to understand a little about this. Like, I think, what role do you think like teachers play in this?
Right. I think it's on top of every teacher's mind. Right now, they're enjoying the services of AI for their lesson planning, getting the assessments done, feedback. They don't have to think too much. The right prompts is giving you just about everything. Right now, yes, they are at that. Educators are really saving time on, doing a lot of things which were taking away. But what remains is the final connection with the students. So that, in fact, the SDR, which we were talking about, that is something that definitely we do. We yet can't say, but to a large extent, AI will not be able to have that human element in it and that kind of understanding which the child and the teacher, the connection that, is so essential for learning to happen. I think that role will become much stronger. And for teachers, I think, yes, that initial fear of AI taking over is somewhere subsiding, and they are understanding their new responsibilities. You're not able to give more time to the students. There are more discussions. There are more, I would say, where the mental wellness, mental well-being of the child is given, probably more consideration, because I think to a large extent it has freed up the stress of the teacher, in terms of her being the person who has to plan everything. She has to, look at the assessments. How am I going to do this now? With that happening more easily, her mental space is freed up to actually attend to the child's mind. So I would think that, instead of, that am I being replaced kind of fear, that freedom that the teachers are, the educators are getting, is something that will probably be a revolution, and, something that will be a positive influence on the society and schools too, of course.
100%, right? Yeah, I think very interestingly, it reminds me about uh, this this philosopher. No, I'm not sure if it's not Wittgenstein. It's Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger, like, very famously, like, said that how in each era, like, the technology defines the society, and then he said this way back, like, hundreds, like maybe 150 years back, right? And it's so relevant that each technology changes the entire dynamic of things, right? And similarly, I think when the definition of a society changes in terms of how the technology defines a society, I think newer interventions are required just to manage the dynamics of that particular sector.
Definitely.
It gets me always back to this one famous event of 1930s, the Great Economic Depression. Car was a new technology, and the moment it was introduced, people stopped using horses, and horses stopped eating corn. Like, there's less production of corn. It affected the agriculture sector, and that affected, like, had a chain reaction to many other sectors. And then the Great Economic Depression of the 90s happened. Lot many jobs were also lost, were at a loss. But the same technology brought about other set of jobs that people took some time to understand what they are, and also at the same time adapt to it. So as much as AI is going to, like, there's going to be a lot many loss of jobs by 2030. Very interestingly, I see at the moment people like Reid Hoffman, to Mark Anderson, all of these great thinkers of their sectors, all of them, like, have this consensus that in the next 5 years, knowledge work is dead. Where any work related to the analysis or that you have to do with your laptop, it's basically dead. Like, you have AI agents that would take care of everything. As we speak, I had this shocker moment yesterday where I came across this company called Oper, which is it recently got funded by one of these top VC firms. And what they do is, tagline is called capitalism as a service. What that is basically is they deploy a swarm of agents, AI agents, onto your company's workflow, data, and all of that. And they're like literally about 100, let's say a million or 100 million, like, AI agents on different parts of your data points of your company, constantly 24/7/365 brainstorming how to elevate the revenue of that company. Now, this is a reality as we speak. And the moment I saw that, I was like, I was just taken aback. To top it, I came across something else called Kafka. So Kafka is another new age company, where you literally go on that platform and you hire an AI agent for yourself. So it's going to be 24/7 employee.
Yeah. And
It does. It does literally everything. What you say, at the end of the day, it makes sure it gets that done for you. So, and all of these guys make sense, right? Like 2030, we shouldn't be surprised if knowledge work is dead. And what are these students who are going to graduate would be doing post the university, right? Is a cause of concern. And I think it's very interesting that we start thinking about these things. Just to add on that, I don't know who said that, finding it a bit hard to pin that person. Maybe it was Sergey Brin. He was talking about how in the early 2000s YouTube came about, and people became YouTube proof. And in the early 2000, post 2010 apps came about, people became app proof. And then you late 20s, sorry, post 2015, the Bitcoin craze happened, people became that proof. Now it's the AI phase, and it becomes all the more necessary that different sectors become AI proof, right? And or if it's students, that students become AI proof. It's teachers, teachers become AI proof. And it just, as a society, we all go through that trajectory, which is very interesting. Martin Heidegger back then said, technology like really like defines a society of that. So yeah, I think with that conversation, right, would love to understand from, this perspective, from your perspective on this as well. What kind of a learner do you think does the world need now?
Yeah, I think with the way it's going, like we just discussed, the exponential growth of, AI's, ways of kind of taking over things which were our daily work routines. Like, now when you talk about when they are like actually looking at your business growth and revenues and doing everything for you, right? I think what this we can think of right now doing for our kids, for the children, is just making them critical, more, uh, focused on just being adaptable to things that come their way. I think the social emotional learning that is something that we're always working on. It just has to be now worked on further. That they need to be more uh, more aware of how to manage themselves, how to adapt to situations, how to find their way through ambiguity and, absolute, I won't say chaos, yes, I think looking at the way AI is going, it's all about ethics. So, is this right? Is this wrong? What's going to be right? What's going to be wrong? And the kind of insensitivity that humans are developing with the kind of power on people's mind. I read something about exchanging brains, transferring brains. I don't know how ethical it is to kind of allow something like that to happen. So I think these are the things that will probably occupy our, our brain space now. So those are probably areas that children will have to be tuned to taking on. And skill wise, like, everything you think of, you kind of realize in another day that AI can do it better. You have your own bot who will probably know more than you yourself. So that's kind of scary that, you yourself are not going to be as, you yourself will be redundant in front of your own bot. Your bot is connected to the World Wide Web, but you're you're yet restricted to your own experiences. So, it's kind of frightening, but I think that's the kind of resilience that students will have to be, I think, made aware of, that you're not going to be redundant till you don't give in to it. You have your human nature, your sensitivity, your ethics, which I will never have. So I think they just have to be prepared for just anything. I think that's what I'm not sure how Oasis or how any school will actually face the challenges. To a large extent, we are dependent on the boards and that we are affiliated to do that for us. So Cambridge, in terms of as I don't know how much assessments will change. Knowing AI is there, but yes, there will be more of, like what we discussed, open book, more of project based, more case studies and problem solving that will come in as our assessments, and not just the regular paper, pencil, and memory and understanding.
100%. Yeah, like this is the enormous change that's going about. And I think it just makes all the more sense that, like we keep, questioning the different aspects of the education sector itself, right? That's super interesting. Yeah, I think it just makes you think about what's coming next and how do we like adapt to it and so on and so forth. It takes me to this hypothetical question that I always think about. I mean, do you think like it's even wise to even think about, let's say, post sixth or seventh grade? There's some element of things that students have to learn over a period of time, let's say in maths and science and so on and so forth. But apart from that, do you think like, there's this open-ended school where students just come and read and just work on projects on different subjects. I wonder what that school would be like. Like student just walks in, feels like, okay, what do I read today in the reading? And then they'll be like, okay, what do I execute today? So they kind of like boil their lives down to these two aspects. And one of the reasons makes me think in this direction is, again, this is a very hypothetical scenario in my head, right? It's because today you have this polymath in your pocket, right? This polymath who knows, like, never in history that you had access to a person or like an entity that you could talk to who knew everything about all disciplines, right? And could now synthesize principles from one discipline and give you like a whole different array of an understanding in a very different discipline. And when you have that, sometimes it makes me think that it's all about the different tiers of questioning or the levels of questioning that you can get into. The ability to ask a tier one question at a certain context, and the ability to ask a tier three level question, and the ability to ask a tier six level question for, and the ability to interpret is generated by these AI tools, right? Or different levels and different tiers. That to me feel like a superpower that a student can have. What do you think about, of such a school, let's say in a hypothetical land, such a school where a student enters, it just reads and executes.
I just feel getting children out of their games is the biggest task, you know. But yes, of course, having said that, the curiosity that is inherent in children and the questioning that, you know, can happen if given the right stimulation, right, is the key to learning. And I think that no one can take away, it's AI or any technology. But to keep that alive, to keep that curiosity alive and to keep that interest going, I just feel that the driving force is I don't know whether people yet believe in it, but the fact that the higher purpose, that, you know, you are here for something more than just what you can see. And of course, to get to that higher purpose, you need to be of service. You need to be of use to the people around you, right? So I think if that is there in a child, and, you know, curiosity to understand how I can be, you know, how I can be of use and how I can, you know, continue my journey to understand what is required of me, right, in the changing scenario. I think that is our, you know, challenge and the only solace and only way to, you know, go ahead. Otherwise, I feel, you know, this hypothetical thing about a child reading a book and kind of getting into a discussion is utopia. It's something that we can't really. Maybe you might get a few to do it, but not like how you get a school to do certain things. It's only a purpose and only a higher purpose that can get children to understand that what is time, the importance of time, managing time, and not wasting it, and doing things in a more structured and a more purposeful way and meaningful. So I think that kind of scenario is very difficult to imagine with
100,
way technology has taken over um, in a lot of negative ways too. You know, it's
100%. I think makes a lot of sense because, as you said, it has to do with curiosity on one end because there's a lot of like neuroplasticity that happens when someone's young and is going to school. And I think it's a phenomenal space of time if someone gets bewitched by the aspect of curiosity. I think it does a lot of good, like in their adult days as well. And it's very interesting that you mentioned that even like in the everyday, let's say how the curriculum goes on and so on and so forth, like there's so many things that a student learns, like even in this daily hours of different periods, where there's aspect of time, aspect of coordination, aspect of being, like really
responsible.
oriented and responsible. There's so many things a student as well learns, I think, which we definitely cannot, and yeah, that just brings me to, like, what would you like? I mean, there's been like a long journey into the field of education. And if you were to like look back, not a couple of years, like maybe a couple of decades, 2, 3 decades from now, what would you like tell your younger self now? What kind of advice you would have given?
Yeah, yeah. I would. I think the way things are today, and, you know, again, coming back to this whole idea of knowledge, I think a few years, like 10, 20 years back, you would think that knowledge is is control. If you have the knowledge, you have the power. So I think I would tell my younger self that, to let go, to not think that you need to know everything. That, you don't have to be perfect in terms of being all knowing, that I need to know everything. And even when it comes to an organization, that I have to be the one who kind of has understanding of everything that's happening. So there is, I think that at that age, of course, you don't have a school to run, but now when I have an organization to run, I know the importance of delegation, the importance of distributing leadership, the importance of letting everyone do what they are best at. But at that time, when you were younger, you felt that you need to know everything and you need to be in control of everything. So I would tell my younger self, access, just let go. Don't have to know everything.
100. Yeah, I think that makes so much sense, right? When you think about it, just relax and not have that pleasure of knowing everything and just be like relentlessly focused on what you're doing, which is super interesting.
So, so I think moving on to the next question. Well, it's really it's really interesting to look at the day of a educational leader, right? The day of a director of a school, because there are a lot many aspects to the educational institution, to a school itself. There are teachers that are teaching out there. There are many students, there are about more than 1,000+ students, and there are different aspects related to leadership and so on and so forth. So I'm really curious to understand what does a day look like in your shoes?
Wow. Okay. So yes, I think it's not a very structured day from the position that I hold. It's I being the director of instruction, we have a principal in place. We have a lot of things after 25 years. But, we have the school running like a well-oiled machine. But the part of the work that I really like to do and which like drives me every day to drive to school is the fact that I pick and choose what the school needs, like for the vision that we have of being a relational school, a school which really focuses on social emotional learning, on keeping the children happy, keeping the children driven, keeping the children really motivated to learn. I think you have to keep doing different things. And that's what I've enjoyed about my work. Right from the beginning when I got into the school and, how my trajectory was in terms of my role here. It was about professional development. And I think that's at the core, capacity building. But at the same time, to put that capacity building into action, I do need to be picking out projects that I need to work on so that the teachers are constantly motivated to learn and do things. So like I don't know whether I mentioned earlier, but the CPD, the Continuous Professional Development Program that we've devised, it's not completely like created by me. I've used the Cambridge PDQ. I've embedded that into the system. But what that really means is that the whole school is relational. The whole school is mentoring someone or the other or getting mentored. Now, mentoring as we understand today is dependent on relationships. It's about working with others so that the others are improving along with yourself. So it's like transformational leadership in action, right? So it's like my your growth helps my growth. It's like we are interdependent. We are working together. So I think creating that, and it's now when I have to look at my day again, when I go, I usually have either observations to do to get into the classrooms, or I need to meet teachers. So our appraisals are based on relationships. Our appraisals are based on professional growth. So we discuss with part of the appraisal. I meet each and every, who comes to me, and we discuss what in their department needs to improve. So it is based on dialogue. It is based on discussions. It's based on, when we discuss, we come up with newer ideas. So they give me inputs and we kind of sit and formulate how to move along next. So that constitutes like, not every day I will be meeting someone, but somewhere I'm going towards it. So I observe, I draw, my conclusions as to what is required. And then when I get a chance to meet them, we discuss these things. Besides the mundane routine as part of management that we have to do a little bit of problem solving and looking into what is required in terms of budgets and finances. But majorly, I look at these things. And of course, students, when it comes to students, since it's our vision to connect everything, what the students are doing, get the students also connected to the community, connected to each other. I look into certain programs. So, when it comes to the service learning, the community building, how they connect, the clubs that they run. So that's the other side where, I get into student program. But largely, yes, my day is meeting teachers and, working with their portfolios, especially the ones that are, I have to get them motivated to do certification programs and qualifications. So, basically the PDQ programs, which I kind of monitor, I take time to go through their portfolios and sit and work with them. So it's again based a lot on a lot of talking, a lot of, interacting, listening, a lot of listening as to what is happening, because as leaders, we can't possibly go around the school to understand. So we are kind of through the eyes of these teachers, we see the school. We see how it's working, where it needs to really improve, and things like that. So it's all about improvement that, my day is about. I don't know whether that made sense.
No, absolutely, absolutely right. I think it's really interesting what you mentioned, that your growth is more intertwined or interrelated to, the growth of people around you and the growth of the institution in itself, which is it's a very wholesome and a holistic way of looking at things. And, where more not like when you see educational institutions going in a very a different direction. But I think this is a fresh breath of air, like to hear that, your growth is intertwined with others.
And just to add to this, the last program that, or the one which we are really now working on, is getting the alumni connected to the school. So we've come up with, so we had Oasis Community Connect, where the students were connected to the community. Now we've started something called the Oasis Alumni Connect. So in that we are planning to get the alumni to come back and mentor, to 12. So we plan to have sessions like 4 to 5 sessions. We'll match the, students with an alumni who has probably worked in that area, who's graduated, who's probably into already working into the society, to come back and give their, experiences, share their experiences with these grade 9 to 12 who are quite confused as to what is, and especially in today's times with AI and things changing, they're confused with what they want to do and where they should, really work on, and what are the, prospects that they have, their studies and things like that. So we're planning to get them to, we just started that, and we have a list of alumni who, want to kind of give back to the school, and we thought this is the best way to do rather than any other. So that's the other exciting part. Like I go to school to understand whether we've sent the forms and how many have replied and things like that. So yeah.
Right. No, that's really interesting, right? And yeah, I think it just tells you about how the role of a director or leader of an institution, it's simultaneously there's zooming in and then zooming out. Like
Yeah, very
it's both
true. I like
looking
that.
at the management aspects. You're at the same time you're zooming out, looking at the broader picture of how does the school look like in the
Always
next.
hunting for people, hunting for the right person to do the projects that you have in mind. So it's really exciting, and there is ambiguity in it, but we learn to work with that ambiguity, that yes, we have the program, but we don't know who's going to come, and then you start working towards finding the right people to get onto the bus. So it's exciting, and that's what keeps us going too.
Super interesting. Dr. Amber, I wanted to understand about, what parts of an educational institution do you think, or other different educational institutions at the moment, you see as what parts of, their system do you think they are overestimating, or do you think that they're not valuing enough? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So when it comes to overestimating, I think this focus on standards and assessments. So assessments definitely are important, and we believe in a continuous assessment system where the child is constantly teaching is assessment. That's what it is. But the way today the marks are looked at and the way the grades are given importance, that's not real assessment. It's, of course, it's a summative assessment, but our emphasis on the summative rather than the formative is really sad. And the kind of teaching towards the summative, that where the teaching is not for understanding, it's not for deeper big ideas or working towards skills and towards creativity and towards innovation. The Whether it's the teachers or it's the students, all of them are worried about the final, the goal in terms of how we get there, but the process, the learning process, that's not given enough of importance. It's like covering the portions. Let's get it done with. So for the teachers, it's about that. For the student, it's like, what did I get at the end of it? It's not about the learning. So I think that's the real, most mainstream schools. They're competing with each other. They're competing for admissions. They're competing for, their brands and things like that. And everything is dependent on how well the final marks are. But that's the really sad part. So if you get into the rut, it becomes a cycle. The students and the teachers and the parents, everyone is after it. But I think we have to take a step back and focus on the learning journey, individualized time to children, because each child is different. The learner is different. Each learner is different. And to focus on their learning needs as to what they really want to do. What do they really want to understand? And, focusing on that and approaches to kind of getting there. The dialogues, the discussions, the group work, the collaboration that is required. That's something that is not given enough time because there's no time. That's the sad part. When you get in a new program, and I think that's our struggle, that we do see a lot of things that we can do in those 8 hours, but because of the pressure of the social, whatever is required of the society, what everyone pressure in terms of exams and in terms of marks, I think that kind of really, it's a pull and push that, what should we put in? What should we remove so that we can try and do things? But unless the understanding is there that the focus is the learning and not the outcome, the effort and not the end, I think, it's always going to be a struggle. And it's teachers, it's a very dynamic system, the school. Everyone has their say. And when we want teacher agency to be there, we have to allow that time to make everyone understand this whole thing and kind of take inputs. Like, no one is perfect. We don't say we have all the best ideas. A lot of it comes from the teachers. In fact, they are the ones who are really running the system. But very sadly, it's the teacher beliefs are very hard to change. So unless they experience the difference, unless they feel that, yes, this is really working, that the belief remains the same. We have to get them to get good marks. The achievement is the mark, but not the progress. So I think that is a struggle for us. I think that's where schools, regular schools remain, the mainstream remains competitive for those areas, unless we actually work on changing teacher beliefs, work towards, clarifying these things, working to show them that, see, this is what you can expect when we work like this. And the change has to be appreciated. The change has to be kind of, given celebration. And then only will it really impact the teachers and we can make certain changes. So I think focus on the content rather than the skills, focus on completion rather than the journey and the discussions and, the newer active learning ways is the real, I think, pull and push.
Very interesting, super interesting, right? I think so many is, like thoughts just from what you just said now. I think to begin with, I think agency is something that you mentioned, right? And how it's so important to give that teacher agency. And also like I think with in this such a different era that both teachers and students like, like require where teachers want to feel the need to have ownership over their teaching, and students also like feel the need to have agency and ownership in terms of how they learn. And agency is such an interesting concept, and I think one of the skills which I think this era demands. I think there was an interesting hypothetical question, right? This question was by an interesting thought leader, and he was trying to emphasize about the role of agency and how that's so important. And he says, if tomorrow, if you are all alone by yourself and you are locked up in a third world country, right, a country which you really like fear going to, and how who's the first person that you'd call her, right? And the person that comes to your mind is a high agentic person that you can totally rely on, because now we have these polymaths within our pockets and you have access to all information. What becomes more important that, I mean, students and teachers and all individuals around us become highly agentic, where we can start relying upon them. That's very interesting. And what you said about this aspect of completing portion, and there's so many other things where educational institutions start overestimating them, and what's important slowly gets away from our focus, right? um it's all about culture, and I'm just tying it back to a conversation which I had yesterday, and there was an question related to that. So someone yesterday was telling me about how Zepto's, if you look at the UI UX of Zepto versus the UI UX of Blinkit, right? You feel like the UI UX of Zepto is very catchy. It feels like every time you're on the app, it feels like it's Diwali, or there's some other festival happening. But the UI UX of Blinkit is very stable. It doesn't feel like there's a festival every other day. He said it's because of the culture that's being followed. For example, Blinkit is Zepto is headed by the Gen Z crowd, and
Okay.
they're all about, because they're a startup, they're all about hyper growth, hyper scaling, and all of that. And they have these patterns where they're saying most of the times, okay, only two products are left, versus Blinkit is very stable because they're already a company which has been listed, right? So essentially what he was trying to see, that there is a top down effect. And I think, like, institutions which take cognizance like yours about these aspects, there is a very different shift that happens on ground versus institutions not taking that understanding or that cognizance, right? And then if you were to like just tie it a little above, right, to the pause, do you think there has to be some with regards to the change in times? Do you think the boards might also have to like rethink in terms of how they're approaching and what's relevant and what's not relevant?
I'm sure they are they have to do it. It's like by default, the pressure is on them to make the changes, because like we just discussed, it trickles down. So what they assess, and what boards are about assessments. So what they're asking for definitely is what will have to change in terms of teaching learning in schools. Yes, I think their beliefs about what needs to be done, what needs to be taught, what children need to learn is going to impact schooling in general. When the schools are autonomous and not dependent on the board, and they are innovative, and they are ready to make changes despite whether the boards are changing or not, of course, I think those are the kind of schools we should look at. Values of the leaders there definitely impacts. I think Leithwood, as one of the educational leaders, his 10 claims of leadership, the first one is that the values of the leader percolate into the school. They are dominant in the school system. So the belief system as to what the ideas of learning and teaching and schooling and education are definitely comes from there in that particular school. So what you said is, yes, makes a lot of sense that Zepto and Blinkit are doing the same work, but the way they do it and everything about whatever what we know about them is what we see on our phones. And yes, it's so stark that they are different. So I think same thing with schools. You enter and you'll know, what's the difference here.
Right. I still recall when you mentioned about this, I think a counselor or a psychologist who walked into your school.
Yes.
And then she was like, there's something different about the school. I think which is very interesting to hear.
So yeah, if it was the base of us getting deeper. So like really exploring, because we are all the time there. We probably don't see the difference. But yes, a third person coming in, definitely, yes. And I think schools like boards do have ways to show how they are different. Like, you go into an IB school and they have their, I think I forgot exactly how many, 5 or 6 kind of values, which will be all over the school. So they kind of, even when you're just walking, you're all the time being bombarded by that. So I think, yeah, that's another way to ensure that the values get in there. Right.
Dr. Amber, it was a pleasure hosting you on the GoSquad podcast series. That was really kind of you. There was a lot of learning that I personally had from this discussion of yours, but really looking forward to more conversations as such moving forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think I enjoyed it as much and learned as much from your
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
Really
much.
appreciate it.
Okay.